Do you suspect that any of this slowdown will stick with us as we sort of like phase back into the old way?
I don't know, but I can't see how it wouldn't. Um, I just think that number one, not everything's going to be up and running. I would think not everything that we once took for granted as available to us is going to be available. And then I don't think we can rule out the fact that people are going to see certain benefits from this, like working at home and spending more time with their families. I'm sure by the end of it, people who've been like stuck with their families have been like, okay, get me out of here. But as some sort of reset, I can't see how some people won't look at this and be like, well, hey, why don't we not necessarily spend 8 hours a fucking day in an office where you're not super productive anyway, necessarily. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but you know what the stats are like with people fucking posting on Facebook and retweeting memes and shit from work and looking at Pornhub and stuff like that during work hours and stuff. You're more familiar with those analytics than I am, so clearly it's not like we can say for sure that working in an office or working at a location is always necessarily the most productive way either. Definitely working at home is hard. There's distractions. It's hard to separate workspace from just your couch or whatever. But I feel like people are going to be like, yeah, there's some cool things about this. Can we split the difference?
Uh,
Right?
I agree, and just to your points there, I feel that I've been way more efficient working. I think that I have completed assignments quicker, just
That's interesting.
being away from the office. Um,
That's interesting. And also the economics of it too. What if business is like, wait, we don't want to pay to have you here as much. Why don't you just work from home? I mean, maybe it's not that cut and dry. Maybe it's more expensive in some ways. I don't know. But like, if
oh,
businesses can start saving money and being more efficient, they're going to do it, right?
I think
What did
in my situation, it's a little different just because I'm pretty sure our station owns our space, so it's
Okay.
like other than like utilities, it's probably like moot. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like let's say you're renting or you're leasing a space and
Mm-hmm.
you're an employer and you can rent or lease a smaller space or not at
That's what I was
all.
thinking.
I think you
Or not
could,
at all.
yeah, you could totally do that. I mean, there are radio stations right now that have gone entirely virtual, um,
Hmm.
where the hosts are recording from their house, and maybe there's a board op in the office. Maybe I've heard of cases where there are, and others that I haven't. And it's just a matter of having the right technology in the right, hooked up right now. Um, so you could see a scenario where if you're a small business or you're a mid-sized business and you don't depend on bringing some place to being at a place in order to do stuff, you maybe you just don't pay for that space, which will cause like a slew of economic problems, I think, on top of the ones we already have. But um, it's also pretty logical, at least to me, and obviously to you. Um,
Right.
uh, but to your point about wasting time at work, there are, for anyone who's interested in this, there are a shit ton of metrics out there about it, about all the things that Saby's mentioned. When we talk about prime time on the internet, it's the workday. Um, and we've seen some interesting shifts in viewing in patterns in listening and patterns in like even like podcast downloads. In terms of during this period, we've gone from, traditional drive time being like the highest amount of times. So drive time being 6 to 9 a.m. and from really like 4 to 7 or 3 to 6 or however you look at it, being like the pockets of time where most people are streaming and downloading podcasts. And since we're all at home, it's all been dispersed across the day.
Right.
And during the workday, in terms of Facebook visits, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, what's another one? What am I leaving out? TikTok also. We've seen during pre-COVID, you saw the heavy use during the workday. Obviously, most people work a relatively similar schedule. It's not 100%, obviously, but a lot of people work in those hours, and a lot of other folks are just they're goofing off.
Right. I always found that really amusing. The fact that's true, it surprises me, but then again, it doesn't.
And the same is true, as you said, of Pornhub and those other porn sites. Yeah, their highest traffic is during the workday.
That's crazy.
It's just really weird, and I don't know if people are. I haven't drilled down on that, so it could be that folks are accessing it on their cell phones. I don't know. I'd have to do that research. But I've seen multiple sources out there saying that sites like that get most of their traffic during the workday, which is just weird. And it makes you wonder about what's going on in a cubicle next to you. And I just find it I do think that there's going to be an evolution in terms of how stuff moves and how we do things out of this in probably the coming weeks, months, and forward. I find it obviously this is just something I am pretty nerdy about, and I just find it's hard to not like I keep wanting to fast forward through this time, and part of me wants to just document it at the same time.
Fast forward to see, you mean to see where we're going, or also just to get through it?
Oh, to see where we're going.
Okay.
I get through it, whatever. But I want to see what's the long-term thing. I mean,
how things shake out.
Yeah. Like we got wings and talked at a bar in late February, and I want to see when that starts to happen again with people.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It might. I mean, by all indications, it's going to be a while.
it could be. It could be a year, maybe longer.
Yeah. Which begs the question: what does that do to us? There's so many different questions here that are not in my lane, but it's like, number one, what's that going to do to us as far as the need for human contact? Like, how much further can people go? Can people stand it? Being exposed to just a small circle of people before they finally just can't resist anymore. Especially, where we live, we're getting into the warmer part of the year, inching our way towards spring, and I do wonder what that, because you notice every nice day there's tons of people on the street, and people are kind of, to some degree, I see throwing caution to the wind a little bit. So there's that, and then I wonder, obviously everything that we're accustomed to having at our disposal, it's that's that's been shaken up, right? Like we don't have everything at the store that we need all the time. I mean, it's been held up pretty well where we are, but um, there could be more disruptions in meats and all sorts of stuff. Um, that's nerve wracking, right? But is it also not something? Is there also, provided that people aren't starving or lacking in essential supplies, um, isn't there some benefit to like not being able to just snap your fingers and make everything appear when you want? Like we're a culture of convenience, and we've gotten way too used to that. We're like we've been like sleepwalking in this state of like 24-hour anything, and I don't know that I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to put a little bit of a damper on that to within reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely get what you mean. I mean, it's a very like Amazon's a bad example for this because they're still cranking out everything, but even they've had to put
Mm-hmm.
limits on everything, and things aren't moving as quickly. Like you actually have to wait for a package instead of it showing up the next day. What the hell?
Mm-hmm.
But there is it's forced sort of a capitalism to sort of slow down. And what you're describing is probably a good way. It's a good lesson to learn. And I would hope that it's a lasting one. That we don't need it right now. That sometimes we can wait. And waiting
Right.
isn't necessarily bad.
Right, and that brings to mind another benefit. You asked me at the start. One thing I noticed is I can stretch out shopping on a budget and shop for 2 weeks, and really, if I really buckle down and have to, because initially when this first hit, they're like, "Oh, get 2 weeks worth of food," because you don't know if you're going to be able to in a couple days. That's how it felt at the time, and so I was very good about stretching. I made one trip and stretched that out for 2 weeks, and it's like, oh wow, I can do this. And I didn't buy any snacky stuff, potato chips and things like that I love, right? So I was like, oh, I can do without that. I can actually responsibly budget if I have to. And so I'm hoping to sustain. I have sustained some of those habits.
Yeah, I think things that are both non-perishable, um, things that you have to put effort into creating,
Hmm.
seem to be having this sort of like this at least online renaissance. And I can't tell you how many freaking women I know are baking something. And even
Really?
I did it once. And I can't tell you how many women I know were so happy about it. But like just it is a thing. Where that's sort of like I also one of the things I keep seeing, and this one seems to be like more equalized among the sexes, is just like not just pictures of food, but like, hey, look, I just this pride over I made this thing.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
And it was a rare thing, or only for a specific segment, and now it's sort of become a broader theme, at least in my world. And I find it I don't know, I don't know what the emotion is, but it's just very new. And
Mm.
I I assume for the better, but I don't know. And I think it speaks to that sort of like, instead of being wasteful and sort of, you know, you know, you know, oh, I'm just gonna go to Popeyes. well, Popeyes is probably not open, or it might be open. I don't know. But or I'm gonna go to yada yada, or I'm just gonna order this. And a lot of people are ordering, and I've ordered some food also, but it just seems like there's this equal trait where it's like, hey, let's use this extra time to actually make stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't ordered out nearly as much. Not even close. So, and in the bigger picture, I just wonder where, because you have to think in some way, shape, or form, commerce will sort of constitute itself around whatever the new limits are, and that somebody is going to thrive and others are not. And so you wonder what business models are going to be moving forward, particularly in the areas that you and I like to keep an eye on, which is media and everything surrounding that. And so who is going to come out on top of in this new landscape, because we don't know exactly what the landscape is going to look like.
I think that's the first point. If you don't know what the landscape looks like, then it's hard to pick out winners and losers. I think sort of what we're seeing from the early returns is that if you provide a flexible service, you're gonna be good.
Hmm.
When I say flexible, Netflix is a great example of that, or Spotify or whatever. If the service it meets me wherever I am in whatever way I want, you're good. You're like people will stay with you at least through the early part of this. If your service is inflexible, network television being one, your demise has been sped up.